Assalamualaikum everybody and welcome to Podcast with Ammi. Today we have a fantastic guest with an even more fascinating topic. We have Natasha Barlas, who's really well renowned in Lahore for the work she's done in child psychology, teenage psychology. She's does a lot of work with adolescents. I've actually personally reached out to her a couple of times for my own kids, so I know she's really highly rated in the work that she does with what is probably the most difficult stage that a child goes through. Today we wanted to talk about this concept of using ChatGPT as your therapist, a concept that's really picking up amongst children. And my own kids were mentioning how you can ask pretty much any mental well-being question to the kid to ChatGPT and you get an answer. So in terms of psychology, is it okay for students to be turning to AI for therapy? Is ChatGPT a reliable personal therapist, or are we really swimming in murky waters? So to answer all these questions, we have Natasha Barlas with us. Hi Natasha.
Hi Aisha, Assalamualaikum. Thank you for having me and for the wonderful introduction.
No, I'm so glad. I've been wanting to have you for a while.
Yeah, and I think you couldn't have picked a better topic, because this is a topic that I feel like every parent is passively or very actively struggling with, who has teenage kids or even young kids who have access to ChatGPT. So I'm glad we're able to talk about this.
Yeah, it's so. Natasha, tell me. Is it okay under any circumstances for students to literally type in, "I'm having exam anxiety, ChatGPT, what should I do?" Or "I'm feeling depressed, what should I do?" Is that okay?
I think before we even get into whether this is okay or not, let's talk about कि therapist करता क्या है. What is an expectation, or what would a therapist do for a child? So Aisha, to keep the conversation going, have you been in therapy, or do you have any idea what a therapist does? If you can, share with all of us.
So I did go for talk therapy after I had postpartum with my 5th kid. And that was the worst. In terms of mental health, I think that was the darkest period I've ever been in. He was a winter baby, my husband was away, so obviously that support wasn't there. He was also the 5th kid, so I didn't really have time to heal, since I had 4 other kids and no husband to take care of. I think everything added up, and I went into really bad postpartum anxiety. And so bad that I was contemplating taking medications, which I've never taken. And at that point, I thought of opting for talk therapy, and it really worked. So over 4, 5, 6 months, everything became better. Obviously with postpartum, the hormones anyway start settling. So that helped, and the talk therapy.
So you would have noticed that your therapist, of course, listened to you, gave you support, but they did more than that, right? They helped you process where your anxieties were coming from. They helped you not only cope with them, but help you really understand why are you struggling the way you are, and that on its own helped. Would that be an accurate description of
Yes.
the therapist does?
Yes.
So,
and also they're very customized, obviously, in how they talk to you, what they do for you. It's all very personalized support.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. So if I throw in, or if let's take a teenager throws in, "I'm feeling depressed," or "My friends don't like me in school, what should I do?" So ChatGPT is, and I think all of us have at one point or another used it, so we know that it's a very validating, affirming, making you feel good about yourself language. So it will reinforce a lot of anything that you are feeling. So imagine you had a fight with a friend and you ask ChatGPT for advice. ChatGPT is not going to help you see where you went wrong. It's going to tell you, "Yeah, you are right, you're not at fault at all. It's so brave of you to open up." And I think that echo chamber for a child who is still developing their personality in this very sensitive stage. We know that adolescence में बच्चों की personality बनती है. Imagine you have somebody who's very confidently, ChatGPT uses very interesting words like, "It's so brave of you, it's so real of you, honestly, this is really encouraging," and it makes you feel what you're doing is something right, even if it may not be. And I think that's where it will make you feel better. It may give you advice, but जो therapist करता है, which is really seeing are you the problem? Of course, not blaming you for it, but sometimes our behavior is the problem that needs to be addressed. ChatGPT वो नहीं करता.
Yeah.
And then that can really validate a lot of unhealthy behavior. Very recently, so to your example of how I had somebody who had heard of somebody, obviously, in line with confidentiality, who cheated in a relationship, and then they asked ChatGPT, would this be cheating? And like, I'm in a long-term relationship, etc. Because of course, like, we talk to AI when we feel guilty and we need to get some like validation. And ChatGPT's response was, no, it's not cheating at all. It's actually so real and brave of you to figure out what your needs are. So imagine when you're doing, something that we clearly know is unethical, like cheating with your partner, with somebody else, and you have this therapist who's telling you, nahi, ye to bilkul theek hai, balki you're the real one, you're the victim here. So imagine what is that going to teach a child? That these behaviors of me fighting or maybe creating problems, lying to my parents, is all okay.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think that's the harm, like, who is monitoring the advice that it's giving.
And also, like, I feel with teenagers and with adolescents, they're also learning to challenge authority, right? And they're walking the very thin line where they want to challenge authority, yet they also want and need structure. And then also, like, they're trying to learn how to stand up for themselves while understanding that some people will have more authority. So I was actually thinking that, what if like my own children were to go to ChatGPT and say, oh, my mom screamed at me today. Like, is that okay? And I'm guessing ChatGPT would be like, it's not okay, it's okay. And which would lead to like eventually a breakup of the family structure, because the family structure is based on the idea that the parents are an authority figure.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point you've raised, because what this will do, so imagine your child broke a house rule, and that's why they got scolded or they got yelled. Like, most of the times, even if parents, the way parents handle situation may not be effective, but their intentions are always to protect the child. But when I throw that into ChatGPT, if a child and a teenager who always thinks from their perspective, like for them, their perspective is the only right perspective. When they're just giving that information without any context, and ChatGPT is not trained like a therapist to pull out context, it's going to villainize the parent and then reinforce that behavior that the child is already feeling, that, oh, my parents don't understand me, these rules are unfair. So they're very less likely to follow those rules, and like you said, it will not only break the family structure but also just create more distancing in a time when kids and parents really need to be close, that kids need to be able to tell what happened with their parents.
Yeah. And the same thing could happen with teachers. Like, let's say if a teacher, I don't know, if a school like sent a kid home because the kid came to school late, or like anything, obviously it's the way you tell the story, right? So the child could play the victim and be like, I was fasting, yet I was sent home, I came, whatever. And ChatGPT could be like, that seems inhumane.
Yeah, it's so unfair.
Yeah, which actually again is a breakdown of the system, because schools basically survive by making sure kids come to school at a certain time, leave at a certain time. If you start, you can't just walk in. So, I mean, what should we do? Because ChatGPT is free, that is the biggest problem. Just like Facebook and Insta. Like, I often think that if these social media tools in ChatGPT was just to have like even a $1 subscription, that in itself would help parents control it so much more.
Have some regulation.
Yeah, but there is none. So most tools that are scary for our kids are free of cost, like YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and now ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
And that is what's scary. I think, so the two biggest concerns that I as a psychologist have with ChatGPT are, one, them just reinforcing unhealthy behavior without giving the kids tools, and two, them becoming a space for kids to talk about their problems, which leads to social isolation. Because now generally, imagine when we were kids, or even right now when you and I have a problem, we vent it, or think, even if we don't go to a therapist, we vent it or think it through with a friend or somebody. And that process, at least have a human being know what is going on. Imagine your child, and every teenager is at one point or another going to push rules. So imagine your child does something that is, against the rule, like they lie or they, make a mistake. If they're not sharing it with their parents, they're not sharing it with their friends, they're only sharing it with AI. Imagine how scary that is. Like, nobody has any knowledge कि ये एक चीज़ हो रही है, to be able to protect that child. And then the advice getting is also so harmful. So it is a really concerning thing. But to your question, कि क्या करें? And I do think that work starts from even before your child reaches that stage of using these resources. So what happens is, I think a lot of parents see a problem happening and then immediately go to like an extreme, no, ये नहीं use करना या नहीं करना. उससे होता है, especially when kids are in their teenage, they are going to find a way to use it and they are going to hide it better.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing you can do for your child is just come in with an understanding, keep an open line of communication that I know you will use this, you shouldn't, it's okay, but just keep letting me know. And that's the best thing we can hope for. Some parents go through extreme measures where they set policies. So yes, so I think complete redactment does never works because बच्चे you
Yeah.
आप social
Whatever you take away is more
they're going to hide.
tempting.
Yeah, you tell them no social media. उन्होंने अपने spam accounts बनाए होते हैं. Same with ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
I think isn't it better that your child is using your account instead of a private account that you don't even know about?
Yeah.
Using it on your device. At least then you can do some monitoring, even if the child is not 100% aware of it. उससे ये होता है, and then keep that open. Never come in if your child uses it and says something you don't like. Don't come in with like judgment because वही fear will push them away and go to a device जो कि बिल्कुल भी उनको judge नहीं करता. So talk to them, keep the conversation open. Use ChatGPT as not an alien or a taboo जिसके बारे में हम बात नहीं करते. Let's talk about हम कैसे use करते हैं. Talk about उसके benefits. Talk about its harm ताकि kids are aware. I think the best thing we can do for teenagers is not just dictate or parent कि ये चीज़ आपके लिए बुरी है, but help them see that this is something that we all have. इसके ये benefits हैं, ये नुकसान हैं. I can't stop you from using it, but never feel that you cannot talk to me if you feel like you're entering these murky grounds because I'm just worried about your safety.
Yeah.
So open communication I think is the best parents can do, and a lot of kids respond to that because all kids want to hear is कि अगर मैंने कोई mess up किया है तो my parents will not judge me.
Yeah.
That is why they go to ChatGPT.
That's actually a really good thought. What do kids want? Like, so in the morning, like I was talking to a colleague and she was telling me about how like problematic her relationship with her parents was, and obviously in her case like her dad was an alcoholic, so like extremes. And then she was talking about like 6 of her friends that she kind of trauma bonded with, and each of them had like a problematic parent-child relationship. Like one of them was the product of a divorce, one of them maybe had a broken home, in one maybe the dad had cheated, etc., etc. But the end result was that the relationship between the parent and the child was traumatic, and hence it affected the child for the rest of their lives. And I was thinking as a mom, like, how do we figure out that our relationships are not traumatic? Like my biggest nightmare is that 20 years down the road, my kids would need therapy because of stuff I've done. And maybe, I mean, whatever I do it with my heart and my intentions and only in the benefit of the child. But like when you listen to these stories, and as a therapist, I'm sure every person you talk to, like has been a problem. So how do we make sure that our kids don't need therapy 20 years down the road?
That's a very interesting thing you said because I recently became a parent. My daughter is just turning 2, and this is a conversation I often have with my husband, right? Like, how do I not give my child any trauma?
Yeah.
He often quotes, because he's an economist, so he's like all about research, and he quoted like an interesting research where there was a child who went to therapy, and in therapy his issue was that my parents were always around, attended every game, attended every match, and it was really embarrassing for me.
Imagine.
And that makes
so parents can't do anything
no.
right.
So I think the best, like that should give you comfort. No matter what you do, you can be the perfect parent, but
even that is a problem.
Even that can be a problem, right? Like imagine the entitlement of this child. My parents were too supportive, and that has given me trauma. But
wow.
I find
as opposed to a dad who's an alcoholic, and that's also given them trauma.
I find that
so
story really funny.
Yeah.
I like to quote it. But so I think the best thing parents can do is be real. So perfect parenting कुछ नहीं होती, authentic parenting होती है. So when you are real with your children, like you will make mistakes, you will prioritize yourself, you will be angry at them, they will be angry at you. But at the end, they will know that this is a person I can count on because they're being honest with their feelings, they're apologizing, they're fixing damage, they are parenting, but they're not just expecting कि नहीं मैंने तो sorry नहीं कहना because I am the parent, right? They're having those real conversations where they're showing them कि अच्छा अगर मुझसे गलती हुई ये मैं नहीं करना है. I think that's the best you can do. The only thing you can do is just try to have a real connection with your child. And that comes when you take away the pressure of parenting. Because even let's imagine our parents, I think millennial parents are very mindful of their children's mental health. But अगर हम अपने parents का सोचें, they were wonderful parents, but their focus was very much on making sure they give us like sustenance, financial security है, stability है. So emotional connection कम ही होता था. So I wouldn't remember my parents apologizing to me when they scolded me.
Yeah.
But it didn't mean that they didn't care about me. But that creates a little bit of a gap in how much I can share. Like I would see them as a parent and not a friend. So I think if we can just be real with our children, like share with them age appropriately, not overshare, but share with them how things are, share with them, if why we have these rules. Sometimes you have to be tough, but keep it warm. Don't be their friend, okay, you're letting them do everything, but like you have rules, but you're being warm about them. You're not withdrawing your love because your child lied to you. या आपकी ego नहीं hurt हुई. So I think if you are real with them, so they will feel safe. Okay, these are also imperfect people जिनके साथ I can talk to and they will understand, because that's all we can do. Like if our children feel safe with us, I think our job is done, which is hard to do because that makes us be vulnerable, and we don't want to be vulnerable in front of our children. But I think that's one thing that comes to your mind. And अगर कोई damage हो गया, repair it. There's no such thing as being perfect. You will make mistakes, उसे repair कर लें. Because then that will show the child that I can also repair a mistake I made, and the love won't go away.
Yeah. But you just mentioned an interesting concept about sharing. And like I realized the definition of family has changed a lot. Like now the single parent is becoming common, like if not the norm, but definitely common. And like divorces are now not like shock. I mean, they don't grab the headlines the way they used to, because you hear about it so much. And so I feel that in the single parent household, you naturally tend to share with your children because you don't have a partner, right? And so like whatever, like financial problems, the children would know more of. That's why I feel even like the children of single parent households are somehow a little bit more mature. Like I don't want to generalize, but I do feel because they're like so financial problems or social problems, or they've seen so much. How do you know what is like you mentioned age appropriate sharing, and I was like, what is age appropriate sharing?
I think that is tricky because you don't want to overshare a lot of problems, because for a young mind, if all they hear about is okay, we are struggling financially, emotionally, my mom is so upset, they will, as you mentioned, become an early maturer, because then they will feel like they have to take care of that parent, so they cannot bring in their own problems. I think what I meant by age appropriate sharing is age appropriate in the language that you use. So for example, to a 5-year-old, if somebody passes away, or if I'm really upset or grieving, to a 5-year-old, my language will be very different than to a 13 or 14-year-old. So you can still share while keeping it one age, like the language in something that's digestible and not that confuses them. And also end on a positive note, because yes, where your child should know how things are, they again also want to make sure that their parent is okay, because at the end they want a stable parent. So if you just share that I gone through a divorce and it's too much and I can't cope, then that child will internalize that parent's stress. So yes, you can share, financially things are tight, but here is what I'm doing to fix it. I don't want you to worry, like things have changed a little based on what was happening, so their expectations are straight, but you're also adding a soft punch, but I don't want you to worry because I have it under control. So now they know what is happening. Mom and dad are like, we are a little upset, but that's normal, parents fight. It doesn't mean that we're not going to talk to each other, we will be fine. So they need that assurance, okay, everything will be okay. So that's the balance. You may share, but then add it with a positive assurance, because that will give them confidence that there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. And as somebody who works with like children, and I think you specialize in like adolescents, which is, I don't envy you. I think that's the most difficult stage ever. What do you feel are like common mistakes parents in Lahore or Pakistan are making nowadays when it comes to adolescents?
I honestly think it's not, so when their child has a problem, not realizing that why the child is behaving the way they are. So for example, if a child is getting into bad company, if they're, trying to get the wrong attention. For example, I think a common concern for Pakistani moms is that their young girls maybe, of course, how do they draw a boundary between having male friends and having relationships at the age of like 12 or 13, especially if you're, you are a balanced religious person, so you're not too conservative, but things like these. And I think what I've often noticed between a mother and a daughter's relationship, for example, or even like sons and mothers as well, is that parents often react in their insecurity. So, for example, if a child hangs out with the wrong crowd, parent will react because they can foresee if the child is hanging out with the wrong crowd, her grades are going to get affected, she may make poorer choices, trust the wrong people, and that for a parent is really scary. So, us anxiety mein they try to like shame and scold and yell and like have serious consequences, no screen time, no device, etc. etc. Lekin that lack of understanding that the mother is showing to that child, usse hota hai that the child then seeks that understanding elsewhere. So if the mother would give the child that same understanding and safety that I'm not judging you, I understand these are things which is appropriate karni hai, like holding on to their own insecurity, especially agar kuch hua nahi hai. Like, if a child, most of the time these kids will be good kids. They're like, yeah, they're breaking rules to age appropriate, but they're doing well in school, they have good grades, they have healthy friendships. So monitoring that, but not reacting out of their anxiety. Usse hoga ye कि a child will be less drawn to seeking the same emotional gap outside.
Yeah.
So ये मैंने काफी दफा देखा है कि parents in their parenting become too critical and too judgmental of their child, which creates an emotional void, and then children seek that void elsewhere.
Oh, okay. You mentioned doing well in school, and that was one of the things I wanted to bring up. So, I remember in my school, I was the kind of kid who would always stand first, awards, so many awards, we ran out of walls to put the awards on, distinctions, valedictorian, head girl, all that. And obviously at that time, nobody spoke about pressure. Also in my case, I think it was very I was self-motivated, self-driven. My dad was a backbencher. But now it seems that there is a lot of, and everybody talks about this pressure. So what do you think has changed? Is it that children are no longer intrinsically motivated? And also I sometimes wonder, is pressure bad? Because I feel that I've performed my best when there's been a deadline pressure, or there's been an exam pressure, or just generally work pressure. So I'm we talk so much about we don't want pressure on our kids. I think a lot of reasons why the IB system even came about and people were attracted to it was they were no exams, no pressure, which is actually not true. The IB system is way more rigorous and harder.
Yes.
Yeah, but this concept of we don't want to pressurize our kids. What is wrong with pressure? And also, is it pressure really that's coming from the outside? Is it pressure coming from the kids? Talk to me about this.
I think it really is dependent on the child. You would know how your child is responding to a certain pressure. Some kids may complain, but if they don't have those achievements, they don't like that. They need that and they're motivated by that, even if the pressure is in the moment too much. With those kids, we help them cope with the pressure. For some kids, the pressure, or हर बच्चे का temperament different होता है. For some kids, the pressure may be so much that it's now becoming counterintuitive. कि उस pressure की वजह से they are not performing well, they're not doing well, they're emotionally not healthy. So then you think, are these achievements that we want for their success even important if the child is unable to cope with this pressure or taking this pressure as something that's negative? So वही I think again listen to your child. Some kids take stress, but if they're not doing well in their grade, that is more stressful to them than the stress they're taking during the exams.
Yeah.
Then we cannot really, then telling them, oh no, I don't care about the grades you get, is not going to help them because they care about the grades that they get. So we need to help them cope. Versus a child who says, nee, I don't want to do this. And maybe they're doing it for different reasons instead of being self-motivated. For those kids, that pressure is probably external and unfair, and that would have more harmful effects because then those kids would start withdrawing from school. They'll think, I don't care, I don't want to do it, it's not, iska fayda bhi nahi hai, because then that pressure has become a negative factor in them achieving their success. So I think how whether pressure is good for people or not really is dependent on that child. So I think for you the pressure was important and you probably just needed or had coping strategies to make it work. Maybe for another child the pressure isn't, the achievements are not worth how it's affecting their well-being, and then we help them find something else that motivates them. So I think individual help, you shouldn't really put a one cookie, cutter fits all kind of thing.
But is it bad for kids to feel pressured, or does it really depend on the kind of kid? Because let's say if it's a kid who can't deal with pressure, but isn't life pressure, like we could manage it till school and be like, acha chalo, it's okay if you like barely passing, it's fine as long as you graduate, great. But then a kid who doesn't know how to deal with pressure, how will that kid deal with life?
Yeah, I agree with your perspective here. I think, जब एक wave आई थी लाहौर में where people were pulling all of their kids out of these mainstream LGSs and sending them to, what, like said, उस वक्त था कि IB system is not stressful at all. But and then you had all of these groups being like, you're going to shift to this system, and now realizing okay, it's
way more rigorous.
And I think so I agree, and I would often think about this, that you probably in an age, so इसको मैं थोड़ा सा developmental context देती हूँ, जो middle childhood की school age होती है ना, which is I think like around from grade 4 to like grade 8 and 9, उसमें बच्चे resilience develop करते हैं. So उसमें this ability, the self confidence के अगर मैं मेहनत करूँ, if I do really well, if I work hard, I will do really well, and even if I fail, that's okay. Versus if I fail, I'm just going to give up and run away. ये बहुत important develop होती है, like we call it industrious or inferiority. So parents who've taken away, parents इनकी coping approach होती है, if a child feels pressured, let's just take away the problem.
Exams miss करवा दो.
Pass हो.
Don't go to, like so often if a kid wakes up and he's like, I'm not feeling well, I don't want to go to school, they'll be like, na jao. And I'm the kind of mom would be like, what do you mean na jao? You have to, because I often wonder when parents like na jao, what will they do when the child is, let's say, in a corporate world and you only have 2 weeks of mandated leaves, right? Like that's all you're allowed in the year. If you work in corporate America, that's all you're allowed. What are you going to do then? What are you going to do if you work in, as a deadline news reporter or an emergency room doctor? You can't really be like, sorry, I don't feel like coming in. That's just not an option in a lot of jobs.
And वही है ना, वहाँ पे होता है कि these kids develop inferiority. So anything that feels difficult, they are going to just avoid it. So they don't really push themselves or really get through the, अगर किसी भी चीज़ में हमने successful होना होता है, we know that we have to get through the really rough patch to enjoy the benefits of it, right? Like it has to be like really uncomfortable and dull, and then you start like getting really good at it. If a child is just like gets an excuse कि हाँ ना जाओ ना करो, that's what they're going to develop. If their boss they're at the job, their boss said a mean comment, I quit. I quit. If work is really hard and they don't do well, I'm going to switch. So they're not really going to feel, there's no confidence in their ability to navigate difficult situations, or हर बंदे की जिंदगी में difficult situation आएगी. So I agree. I think coddling our children and taking away their problems is not the solution. The solution is to help them cope with the pressure, meet them with understanding. So वही balance है. You're not saying oh no क्या होता है pressure करना ही है, and if you don't do well, you're in trouble. That's harmful. If the pressure is parents' expectation instead of the stress of working. So अगर आपके बच्चे का A- आता है instead of an A, how are you handling it? If you're handling it, oh no, why did you get this A-, you're a terrible kid, etc. etc. So वो pressure is wrong kind of pressure, because वो parents को please करने का pressure है, काम अच्छा करने का pressure नहीं है. But if the child did their best and they got an A- and they felt stressed during that process, उसमें that stress was good. That stress got them the A-, and then that stress will help them do better. So I agree with you. There is a balance. You shouldn't just change the goal because it is going to be difficult, because it is going to be difficult at every point. But really remember, goal क्या है? Is the goal doing your best, or is the goal the outcome? I think यहाँ पे parents confuse कर देते हैं. Parents want the outcome, the A's ही आने चाहिए. And if your child did their best और उनका उसका B+ आता है, that's good enough. But at least effort sincere हो. Effort sincere नहीं है, वहाँ पे pressure डालें, because we know they can do more. And I think both parents को individually पता होता है. मैं यहाँ बैठ के नहीं कह सकती कि आपके बच्चों का potential कैसा है, because you know your kids' potential and what's important for them.
I also want you to talk a little bit about what we should expect from schools. So when I look back at my school journey, like I was really celebrated throughout my educational journey because I was like the best kind of nerd you could be, like literally super confident, teacher's pet, always like acing homework, matlab, would be finished days in advance, like that kind of nerd. Would always want to do extra work, and then I genuinely loved studying. So I just feel that later on in life, but like, when people tell me you're so confident, I always look back and think, that's where it's coming from. The fact that I was so celebrated at school, and schools are bubbles. So in the school, I feel like, mere jaisa to koi hai hi nahi. I'm like so exceptional because I would hear that so much. And that has led me to believe in my own kids' lives that we should try and find schools for our children where they thrive, where they are celebrated. So, like for example, in New York, there's a very high performing school, which is specifically for like performing arts, and it's a high school, but everybody there is like into performing arts. And so obviously, if you have a child who's into acting, that would be a great school for them to go to. Then there's another school, I think St. Anne's, where they do a lot of like narrative writing, and they have multiple writing curriculums. So if I had a kid who wanted to write a book, that would be a natural fit. In Pakistan, to ye itna nahi hai. But do you think this is the right ethos? That I know we choose schools for brand names, like we like beta hai, HSN jana hai, bas jana hi jana hai. It used to be ki ladkiyon ke liye convent jana hai. I think that's dissipated. And so for girls, people do end up choosing idhar udhar. I feel for girls, they also choose based on, oh, my friends are going to that particular school.
The network, many other factors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are those the right decisions, or should it really be like, okay, this is the kind of kid my child is. Let's find a school where he's celebrated.
Yeah. I think the first thing that came to my mind when you were talking about all of those things was, I do wonder how your high school success impacts your kids. Because children can take that as both, something to inspire to and something that makes them anxious to live up to. So I was very curious about how your kids handle.
So I mean, my kids are mashallah like achievers in their own right. So Rania is a national swimmer, and my success was very academic. As a student, like I was like an excellent like tennis player, but not like national team level. And Rania's that, so I think she's kind of carved that out for herself. And I have one kid who's very academic, like very much like me, and he's mashallah doing really well also. I'm not sure, like sometimes they say their dad didn't have like the rock star academic career that I did, so he, I think, tries and balances it out with them. Because he had a good career and he went on to medical school, so all that was great. But like I was like, the kind of stuff that legends are made of, which now looking back, I wonder if you even need to put in that much effort into grades. And I like, even myself, I'm like, I don't think that was needed. Like, I don't think you need to study 18 hours in O levels. I feel that's actually a misuse of your time and a misuse of your abilities. And it basically means that you're not learning smart studying, and you obviously, like when you're spending like so many hours studying, then you're giving up on a social life. And so in hindsight, I feel that I could have learned better skills at that time, and I might have still gotten the same grades without going like so insane. So I'm not sure, like I feel maybe the fact that my achievements are so like visible and audible, because obviously I also went to school in Lahore, right? So they're kind of growing up around people who like, oh my god, your mom was a genius, or oh my god, your mom is a genius. So I feel that that's given them the idea that they need to be achievers. But hopefully, like, you'll have to talk to them to know, are they traumatized or inspired?
Like you mentioned, every child.
Yeah, they might just be like, they might be coming to you like 10 years and be like, our mom being an achiever was the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But
I'm an achiever, but I hate it.
Yeah, we hated having a mom who was an achiever. It was traumatic. I think that it's led them to understand that being an achiever is the norm and not the exception, and pushing hard is the norm, and doing well. Like my daughter is only in grade 8, she's only like 12, and she came to me yesterday and she's like, what should my pathway to Harvard be? And it didn't strike me as odd, because I feel like in our house, these conversations are normal. Like Sharan, who's like 8, is like, what should my pathway to being recruited by a professional football team be? And Alu, like who's only 3, like comes to me and he's like, oh, how do I become the best gymnast in my little baby gymnast class? So I feel like on our dining table, like these are conversations that take place all the time. My husband and I are both very driven towards self-improvement, achievement. Like my husband went to LBS after 5 kids. So he went to do his master's at London Business School after he was a dad to 5 kids. So a lot of people would have been like, why? But like
It's
in
important,
our, yeah, and in our family, the idea that you're always improving, achieving, moving towards a goal is kind of the vernacular at the table. So I don't know, like, I mean, you know, when I listen to other dining table conversations, they're like obviously very different to ours. Like, we don't generally talk about like movies that are out and all. We do a lot of like talking about where do we see ourselves. We discuss TED Talks, and we talk a lot about like books that we've read, and like mainly like the kids' dreams and where do they see themselves, how do you get to that dream. I don't know if that's pressure, I don't know. I mean, part of that is probably influenced by the fact that I've lived my life like driven by goals and ambition.
Yeah, and I think you have sort of answered your question here a little bit. दो चीज़ें आपने mention की थी. One, it is a little balanced household. So your kids, yes, do see an achiever, high achiever like you, but they also see their dad who was an achiever in his own way. So even if he didn't have the straight A's, genius, checking every box off the school list, he still is extremely successful. So
Yeah.
they've seen that as well. And I think that dynamic is a good balance in helping them see. So I feel like the concern that can happen, I'm not saying that happens here, but the concern that happens when parents put pressure, कि नहीं, you need to score straight A's, you need to do well in everything, otherwise you will fail. I think that pressure is harmful for kids, because then even if they, and I'm sure you in your adult life have also, when you went to the real world, everything did not come easily. Like it was more about, even if you failed in one thing, how you coped and made it successful for you. That's your story, not you applied to the first job and you got it and you applied to the first. See, but I think जब parents pressure डालते हैं ना कि anything below something is a failure, वहाँ पे kids struggle to cope with what inevitably is going to be a rejection in their life, because so your daughter, I really hope she gets into Harvard, but maybe for luck, no reason for her, like I really hope not, but let's say she does not get into that dream school, but she gets somewhere equally good. So if a child thinks, if I don't get here and I'm a failure, what that will do is they will just give up on all the other options that can still help her achieve the same place Harvard meant to take her.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the pressure is. So and so I think if you're able to balance that, yeah, we should push ourselves, because I agree, like we shouldn't just give up even without trying. But if plan A doesn't work out, there is plans B and C and D, and have faith in your abilities. I think if you do that, and I'm noticing from your conversation that your kids are self-driven in that, because they're very focused on अच्छा मेरी abilities क्या हैं. And secondly, your kids are not on the same mainstream path. So a lot of parents also project their own journey or lack of journey on their children. So if I didn't do well in school, I want my kids to do well because I feel like I missed out on that. Or if I did really well and my outcome was great, I want the same for my kids. But I noticed that all your kids have very different journeys. Like it's very achievement based, but focused on them finding a niche.
Yeah.
So whether they want to be a football player, you're not condemning कि नहीं swimmer तो कोई success profession नहीं होता, grades आने चाहिए, या footballer क्या होता है. Like I think you're not doing that from what your conversation, like you're helping them specialize in something, and वहाँ पे push करना तो important है because we need to push them.
Yeah.
Then your daughter will probably not become a national swimmer if you didn't push her to do 5 a.m. swimming lessons on days when she didn't want to.
Yeah.
But to push her to do everything, so do you get the difference? And I think since all your kids are showing signs that they have their own unique journey that they're passionate about, I think passion वही है तो वो self driven आ जाएगा, पर वहाँ तो push करना पड़ेगा because no child realizes मेरे लिए ये चीज़ अच्छी है. Like parents have to make those decisions for them.
Yeah. You know, I want to talk a little bit about sports. So I was listening to a TED Talk recently. Obviously, as you can see, we listen to a lot of TED Talks. This was actually a graduation speech. It was fantastic. It was by an Olympian swimmer.
Yeah.
And she was talking about like her journey, and then she became a mom, and then she's talking about that. And one thing that she said was that make your kids play sports. And I've actually seen, heard these words echoed by parenting experts, by high achievers. Like I think, by CEOs at Google. Like I've heard them when you talk to them about parenting, a lot of them seem to say, make your child play a sport. And that was like one of the reasons that I also believe that the best teaching ground is the sports field. So I always pushed my kids कि sports तो करनी ही करनी है, चाहे chemistry की exam late हो जाए. Like I feel I'm the other way. So like for me, the fact that they play sports is just an essential, like is a non-negotiable. But what is it? Like why do you hear some of the most high-performing people in the world talk about, as a parent, make your child play a sport?
And I think let me link this back to our initial conversation as well. So sports the benefits of sports are numerous in fields beyond athletics. So yeah, if you play a sport and you're really good at it, the competitiveness and all of that comes in. But sports is good for your physical health. Is good for your mental health, because you're literally, when you're out there running and exerting your muscles, serotonin is getting released. Dopamine is getting released in your body, and endorphins, which are generally happy chemicals. So it's good for your mental health. Sports is an excellent way to socialize. So you're learning team building. If you're in a team sport, you're learning conflict resolution. You're learning problem solving. You're learning thinking quick on your feet. You're learning team building, friendships, how to navigate situations, how to navigate authority. So all of these social skills you're learning by just playing an hour of football, for example. It helps with social bonding. So you will see a lot of like athletes have or kids who play sports have a very strong communal bond. So I think that's a great benefit to that. So the reason people encourage sports so much is that the benefits of just being outdoors, playing with people, and this is what child psychologists talk about as well, like Jean Piaget, who talks about cognitive development. So for somebody to be really intelligent, kids, you don't need to teach your kids ABCs when they start speaking. You need to teach them how to play, because play helps with imagination, and then those skills build up to a lot more skills that we need in our other athletic fields. So the benefits of sports are just numerous across your life. And I think a big benefit, if you are playing sports, it is going to leave less time for you to rely on your devices and then sort of go into that isolation, because the harm of devices is not really, if you're on screen too much, you're going to get cancer, or your eyes are going to hurt. Of course, that's like the eye part is there, but it's that you're socially isolated from yourself. You're not really learning how to sit and talk to a crowd. How will you network when you don't even know how to talk to a crowd, because all your conversations are happening typing behind your wall? How are you talking through a fight that you had with a friend over a match when you're asking AI how to do it and nobody's really helping you through it? Or how are you coping with not becoming captain? That's a coping skill that you're learning as a 10-year-old, which will become a really important tool when you're applying for a CEO job and you don't get it, that you've learned, I will still be fine. So being out with people reduces the chances of you relying on technology 100%. You may still do it, but for the heavy loading, you have your people to do it. So I think in today's time, get your kids out, that they're so tired to come back to a screen.
Yeah. And there was another thing that I've heard. This is like kind of like something that I have also learned to believe in, but I've also heard this talked about by like so many like experts on performance, not just parenting. And so, I often like quote this example. So somebody asked like Warren Buffett that how do I make my child a millionaire, or how do I become a millionaire, one of those. And he gave the best answer. He said, if you want to be a millionaire, sit amongst 4 millionaires and you'll be the 5th. And then I think a similar question was asked to Mark Zuckerberg or somebody on how do I become an entrepreneur. He's like, you want to become an entrepreneur? Sit with 4 entrepreneurs and you will be the 5th. And that has led me to thinking about the importance of company. And I feel that I feel like I've tried to do that with my kids also, that try and expose them or like help them develop relationships with people who are achievers in whatever field they want to be achievers in. So like entrepreneurs or researchers or doctors, And I somehow feel that we don't realize the importance of that. We're in Lahore so focused on socializing in our comfort zones, where our kids would only meet their cousins, for example, or like our daughters would meet the daughters of other friends of ours. And we don't realize that the biggest stimulator, just from what I've learned and seen, to becoming successful yourself is to be like around success. So like, with Ahil, my son, for example, he's like very driven towards STEM. So I'm always like pushing him. And obviously great STEM work is not being done by teenagers, it's being done by university kids. So he has a lot of those relationships where they would literally get on a call and discuss like CRISPR gene editing, or they'll discuss like genetic modulations. And I feel that the reason he's an achiever is partly because he has those examples around him. So how important is that, or is that not important when you're a child?
I think that's very important, but not the only important factor. So extremely important, because research has validated it numerous times that your grades, let's take grades example, like will increase by 5 to 10 to even 15% when you are in company of high achievers.
Yeah.
But your grades will drop by 20 to 35% when you're in the company of poor achievers. So bad company has a significantly more pull than good company. So good company does. Good company definitely, because it inspires you, it encourages you to do really well. So yes, but I think the balance here is that, of course, yes, they should be around good company, but they also need to learn to be around diverse company. So it's a balance, right? Like yes. So for example, if I am not around peers I'm thinking of a teenager. If I as a teenager am not around peers my age, and I'm only around and I'm saying it's about if I'm only around adults know how to navigate emotions. So if I'm having like an emotion, they know how to handle my emotion, but teenagers don't. So the skill I learned of navigating stressful situations, how do I handle where people don't like my interest, how do I fit in a crowd, because you and I both understand, okay, a lot of success is also fitting in and being a leader and standing out. So you can have all your accolades, but
if you can't have a conversation, if you can't like communicate with people, then those accolades
don't matter. And those skills a lot of times don't come from adults, because if I'm talking to a child, I will handle their emotions because I know how to regulate those emotions. But if a child is talking to another child and both are wahan pe, the child will learn how to navigate that situation, and that is an important skill as well. So ये balance की बात है. Yes, encourage them, but also as long as the company is not bad company, like as long as the company is teaching them something, not again, like bad company is worse. So if it's a neutral company, it's teaching them.
I don't think I'm going to forget that number. So a bad company can bring your grades down by 30%.
Bring your success overall. Grades can be an example. I think the research talked about grades. I may be misquoting, but yes, overall, the influence it can have is that much. लेकिन वही है कि if I'm if a child is so हम छोटे बच्चों को encourage करते हैं to be around their age peers, because if they're around like 7-8-year-olds, they're not going to learn to wait, because that grown up is always going to let them get their way. So then they're missing out on an important skill. They're missing out on socializing, being friends with people their age, and that wahan pe bhi you learn so much, and you develop like really genuine bonds with those people who as you would know, you're also from Lahore, are networks for life. So वो balance ही बात होती है. So let's not stop them. Like make sure they have like a holistic social circle, but with inspirational stories to motivate them.
And Natasha, tell me that now Lahore's very much become a two-income household. I think post-COVID and then the inflation, recession, everything added up to life in Lahore becoming so expensive, which really means that most kids now have working moms. So as working moms, and I know this is the quintessential question, and even Hillary Clinton is like, there is no balance, which maybe there isn't. But what should like non-negotiables be for working mothers when it comes to their children?
I think their own well-being.
Really?
Yeah, because if you're not a happy parent, you are going to bring that resentment into your child's parent. So the ideal, but again, like, bearing in mind if you can afford it, the ideal place is that you are there and present for the first 3 years of your child, definitely, because that is when they're really developing, and those relationships are foundations for how they trust the world, how confident they are, etc. And you can still do that while being a working mom. When you have to. That's why I think in Lahore we should be really grateful for the village that we
Yes.
have, the help.
Paid and unpaid.
And unpaid, right? Like, I think if I'm not settled abroad, the major comfort I have is that I have like this whole village of grandparents who love my kid and are raising my kid, so I can be here, do all of these
Yeah.
things, and like, you know, work on my career. But realizing, okay, maybe in that moment, what is my priority? So in my initial 3 years of my child, maybe my priority, if I'm able to afford it, is not my career, is sustaining that career, but I can be more present for the child. So I can. It's not
Dial it
about
down.
having everything 100%. It's about आप अपने कप को 100% कितनी चीज़ों से fill करते हो. So maybe like 80% of the time is with my, 70% is with my kids, 20% is for my career, and 10% is for me. As my kids get older, I can, you know, reduce the parenting time, increase the career time. So that's, so how you balance that is how you try to have it all. But I'm being mindful that not every mother, like, you know, if you're a single mother, if you're a, you know, double income household with expenses that you can't afford help, you don't have that village, usme you don't need to feel guilty, because if you're able to do things you need, so if you need to take a spa day or like just take a break, meet your friends once a week, because that will recharge you, you will be a lot more positive parent
Yeah.
when you come home.
Yeah.
And that your child will remember that, because your child will pick up the 10 minutes or an hour of positivity or the 8 hours of just grumpiness because you're like, you know, not coping with your emotions.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Natasha, in all the years that you've been working as a psychologist, what do you think are like the cardinal truths to bringing up like good, healthy, productive kids?
I think I've said this in so many times. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. Just be a present parent. You know, if you're a present parent for your kids, you're mentally there, and mentally there, then you will be more attuned to how they're feeling, attuned to their needs, being aware of their skills that you can push them. If you're able to be present and emotionally, like if you're able to cope your emotions and be healthy, so a lot of working on yourself, I think you will just reap that energy into your kids. So your kids are not going to learn from what you say, your kids are going to learn from what you do. So if you're happy, they're going to pick up that happiness, they're going to pick up that positivity. But if you're always stressed, anxious, distracted, they're going to pick up that as well. So just be a present parent.
Great. Is there anything you'd like to add as like passing advice to mothers?
No, I think even though we started with AI, we've like delved into parenting in general, and I think I love that. My only last minute would be that, and I think you mentioned this, don't compare dining table conversations, because your dining table conversations are what makes your family values, and everybody, the grass may feel greener, so maybe like you said, you may feel guilty that you're not leaving any time for your kids to watch TV, discuss Netflix, but what you're doing is also building that present connection with your kids. That's your special moment, so don't feel guilty, okay, because then it's never ending. Okay, I am not doing XYZ, because everybody is going to be doing something that they're specializing in. So as long as you're doing something that's working for your family, and you're the only one who can know this. I cannot know what's working for your family or not from the outside. I can pass a judgment based on the fact that it may not work for me, but that may not be accurate. So wahi baat hai, don't feel pressured. Your kids are going to be fine if you push them and send them to New York. Your kids will be fine even if you are unable to send them to New York. So don't take that pressure. Just be there. If you're emotionally there, your kids are going to carve their own pathway, and do really well in life, even if you don't give them 100% of everything all the time.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. It was so great to talk to you as always. There are like millions of other questions that I could have asked. I think this as a field is like all encompassing. Like there's no end to what you can talk about when it comes to doing right by our kids.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed, I always really enjoy talking to you. So no, I'm really glad that you got me, invited me
Yeah.
here, and I was really, the yes couldn't be more louder to talking to you about this. But no, I really hope we get to do this again. I
Yes,
think
for
it was really
sure,
fun.
for sure. Thank you everybody for watching, and I hope many of your questions were answered. If you still have more questions, definitely like send them our way and we will send them to Natasha. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for that.
Thank you, Hafiz.
We just need to record your